Folks, this is interview number 4 from HollyShorts. I am here with director Ted Clarke, who has done a little 13-minute project called Clergymen. And I don't mean to say little because it's gargantuan in many ways, which we'll get to. So, Ted, first of all, thanks so much for making time for me. Tell everybody a bit about your background because I know that you've been to a few different diverse places as far as filming. And second of all, tell me why you got into filmmaking.
I'm gonna skip over the incredibly cliche answer, which you seem to hear all the time, which is through skateboarding, which is how
Really?
I began and how I picked up a camera and what just became my obsession. Because on one hand, I was unfortunate enough to be a lot worse at skateboarding than most of my mates, so I figured the best way to keep up was to film them. But then the other thing I would say about it is having an international background and an international upbringing and kind of moving around from place to place during my childhood, I found the one constant and kind of consistent thing I could always fall back on in terms of culture and language was film. It was something I think my family, they share an equal passion for it. My brother, Max, he works as a sound engineer in the film world. My dad is just film obsessed. He doesn't work in the industry, but it is definitely a passion of his. So it's always been around and just something I've loved. Yeah, from as far back as I can remember.
There are oftentimes international filmmakers that I've screened or that I've watched films, and a lot of times people say that international filmmakers are known for more art house films, more experimental type films. Would you concur with that? And would you also say that Clergymen, in some ways, is an experimental film?
Definitely agree with that. I would say Clergyman is an experimental film, but not in that way. In the sense of experimental, it's 30 minutes, it's two people in one room talking the whole time. It's much
Correct.
more theatrical than it is, I think, what you would traditionally see in especially a short film, which is kind of a medium where I think filmmakers are encouraged to really push boundaries in terms of how they film things and the manner in which they approach them. Whereas I would say Clergyman is quite simple in that aspect, but
Mhm.
also you're always asking a lot of an audience to watch 13 minutes of two people sat back to back talking. So I would say on one hand, it falls into that category, and on one hand, it definitely doesn't, because it is conventional in terms of how it was made, but maybe less conventional in terms of the short film medium. But that was it was always the intention. I wanted to, and this is ignoring kind of all the classic budget restrictions and all that that I'm sure you hear a lot of when you talk to people about short films.
Yes.
So this to be fair, the idea and the concept had we didn't have any restrictions. I wanted to make something with two people sat in a room, and that was before I ever knew what kind of budget we would have or anything like that. So
Okay.
this isn't it wasn't a product of okay, how can we do this with as little as possible? It was I want to make a film that is theatrical in nature and just two people talking.
Now, you just mentioned to me that you recently spent a good deal of time in Germany, of course, on a project.
Yes.
So, talk to me a bit about what the allure or the appeal is to going to Germany, besides the obvious for most of us. It's beautiful there, I'm told. And then, second of all, what do you find in another country that you don't find necessarily in the United States as far as filming?
So I've only ever done very few things in the United States in terms of filming.
Okay.
So I don't have the biggest pool of kind of knowledge to pull from there. But in Germany and working around Europe, it's just everyone's approach always feels different. And in Germany, not to jump on the cliche, but our crew and everyone was so efficient and so passionate and kind of no one felt like they were there to do it as a job. It was all everyone loved what they do, and that's why we were there. And when you're working in an environment like that, it's not work. It's just pure joy. And you get a lot of that in the UK as well. So that's primarily where I do most of my work. And you have people who are used to pulling their socks up and making the most out of tiny budgets or limited time. So when you work with a team of people who just are so clued in and are so professional, it makes everything easy.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. The last filmmaker that I was talking to did mention, of course, that there were complications because he did his shooting in London and Canada, complications with finding crew, et cetera, because we've all kind of been living in this same sad reality for the last 2.5 years. So, as far as with you, was that your similar experience? And more importantly, as far as working today in the film industry, tell filmmakers a bit about the complications with the new kind of world we're living in right now. Did you find any?
So I think I'm in an unconventional and very fortunate position where I work for the company London Film and Television
Right.
as an in-house director. So I do a lot of kind of commercial stuff with them, and then with that comes the freedom to do projects like Clergymen.
Okay.
And we have a core team of consistent collaborators in terms of editors, colorists. We have a DOP, Michael Lloyd, who I've worked with basically every project I've done in the past 2 years. He has his kind of go-to people. So we kind of we had issues in Germany finding this crew initially, but working in London and on Clergymen specifically, it was a very small crew, and they were all basically are the people we usually work with on a kind of day-to-day basis. So I was very lucky that didn't quite have that complication. Um, and then with the second part of the project, the question, yeah, I think with short films especially, it's always hard to get kind of people involved because it's gonna be low money, it's gonna be long hours, it's gonna be
Right.
in Clergymen, we filmed in a church in 30-degree heat. I'm not quite sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's very hot over here. And it was a long day. It was a very sweaty day. So yeah, I think we were lucky that everyone who was there was invested in the project and had worked with us before, and we know and liked. So yeah, we kind of just really sidestepped that whole. I was incredibly lucky that those kind of complications never really arose, and finding crew just fell into place quite
Nice.
organically.
Very cool. That doesn't
But
happen
what
all
I
the
will
time.
say is that the crew I have worked in the US before, they do take that level of professionalism to the next level, and
Ah,
I think it was one of the smoothest things I've ever encountered. So
nice.
props to them, and I hope I can come back and do more.
Oh, betcha. Now I'm sitting and listening to him, and I'm sure my audience, as you listen to this interview, you'll hear the accent, of course. So I have to ask, because I know you're a writer and a director. So why aren't you acting? Because of course everybody wants to listen to somebody who sounds like this. So will you get to that point, or is there just no interest? I find sometimes directors will turn the camera around on themselves.
Maybe it's that thing of if I get in front of camera and it's bad, I have no one to blame. So no,
Understood.
I definitely not. Yeah, I've never thought about it. I've never if the opportunity comes where I need to and I end up enjoying it, then maybe, but
Ah.
I'll leave it to the pros.
There you go. I gotcha. I noticed in looking at your resume that, of course, most often you're more so a director than you are a writer. So it begs me to ask the question: is there something that compels you to the director side versus creating the storytelling? I would have pegged you as both writer and director parallel.
Because as a director, you get almost like tunnel vision on
Sure.
an idea or something that you're trying to create. That can be a great and really fulfilling experience when you see something that you've just been so zeroed in on come to life, and especially if it works, that always helps as well. But there's times where I think you can be given something, or someone could come to you with a log line or a short synopsis that you just go, yeah, never in a million years would I have come up with that. And that just really kind of grips you. And like with Clergymen specifically, so Will Gillis, who was the co-writer on it and is a great friend of mine, I came to him saying, so he essentially he brought the script to life, to give him full credit there, in the sense of I sat down with him, I said, I want to do a film that's two people tied to chairs as a long fuse burns towards them and it never comes to an end.
Right.
And he took that, went off, kind of gave it the things that made it a film. And then when I read that, it was kind of like, okay, great. Now I've got a million different ideas. And then I
Okay.
came in and added my kind of personal touch to it there. I think it's that just with all filmmaking is collaboration. And I think if I left it and tried to tackle the script myself, I probably would have gone off in a completely different direction. But getting it back from him and going, oh, wow, yeah, this was not at all what I was thinking, but I love it and
Mhm.
I want to get stuck into this. So I think just having that person or people to collaborate with is just so useful. And obviously you at the end of the day, you have to then kind of go, okay, well, I connect to this more than that, and I want to go this route as opposed to that route. But being able to explore different kind of avenues that you just maybe wouldn't have come up with yourself is invaluable. And I much prefer that way of working. So the
Okay.
short I have next coming out, I wrote fully myself. And it's been a great experience. I loved it. I love the script. I love the film. But I immediately went back to Will afterwards and said, I have another idea. Let's do this
Hmm.
together. So
Look at that.
that probably says more than anything.
You betcha. My gosh. Now I have another two industry questions. One speaks to the festival side of things. Obviously, of course, you have submitted to Holly Shorts and have been accepted. So, one of the things filmmakers talk about a lot is how to pick and choose selectively where you go to festivals. Obviously, of course, Holly Shorts and Sundance and Tribeca are a given. So, in your mind, what makes you select particular festivals to show your work?
So in terms of its importance, I am fully invested in it. I think they are incredible. I love them. When I'm in London, I try and go to every single one I can go
Nice.
to around here. I think they are so great in every aspect. And because yeah, at the end of the day, for me, it's the second you get a laurel on it or whatever, it feels incredible, and you get that immediate kind of happiness and an accomplishment. But at the end of the day, you want your film to be seen, and you want it to be seen on an impressive screen
Oh, yeah.
and to as many eager people as possible. So I think just getting the opportunity to do that, yeah, it's just incredible. One of my earlier shorts, the delivery came out right as COVID was happening. So I managed to see it at one festival on a big screen, and it was the typical kind of nervous, like, oh God, I don't know if I want to go. I don't know if I want to be
Sure.
there. I don't want to sit through it. And then I was sat there in the cinema watching it, and it was one of the greatest experiences I think you could get as a filmmaker. So yeah. So with that, festivals are just they're the way to go. And then in terms of the strategy, this is a very boring answer, but I leave it up to other people at London Film, the producers who are a bit more
Sure.
tactical in their choice and everything like that.
That
So
makes perfect sense. You betcha. We also talk a lot about clearly it's been known that features are much harder to get distributed versus short films. It's something that's been going on for quite some time. So I wanted to ask you that. In my mind, at least when watching Clergymen, that is something that could have been stretched out to more of a feature, meaning telling more of the story of where they got to where they were and after. So was there ever a consideration of a feature, or was that in your mind? Meaning, like, if we want to get it distributed, better keep it to a short.
there was definitely not to begin with, but kind of as we got further into it and the edit was kind of nearing its end, it was yeah, that feeling of okay, I quite like these guys, and there's a lot of questions that are being raised and a lot of backstory that can be explored. So there definitely was that kind of feeling. I think I've got a couple more ideas that I would like to explore first,
Okay.
before coming back to it, but there was definitely some thought afterwards.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then before I forget to ask the technical question, because I do like to ask about what you shot it on, because it's hard to tell. And more importantly, why you selected that particular camera to use for this project.
So we shot it on a red helium.
Okay.
We chose that camera because it was free and accessible to us.
Well, there you go.
No, I'm a firm believer of lenses and lighting are a far more superior thing to consider when it comes to making these. The red's a incredible camera as well. So
Sure.
the fact that we had that was lucky. Can't remember what lenses we shot it on.
Oh, that's okay.
They were anamorphic, but I can't remember exactly what type. But we did a lot of testing with them, because I knew I wanted to go wide angle and kind of up close when filming the faces. So yeah, we settled on that. And yeah, sorry, apart from that, technically,
No, no,
I
no,
can't
that's
quite
okay.
remember.
I like to give a sense of that because cameras, play an integral role along with everything else. And oftentimes filmmakers are looking for other suggestions or things to use, et cetera, or other
Yeah,
tricks that they haven't
absolutely.
tried. So before we talk about the film, I just want to ask you if somebody is watching this who is either 40 or 20 or even in their teens and they want to get into the film industry, give them one go-to, just one go-to. If there's one thing you would say to them, just remember to do this or remember this mentality, et cetera, what would it be?
Just ask. Like, oh, the worst people can do is say no.
Hmm,
So if you're scared to get a named actor, or if you're scared to get a piece of equipment or anything, and it reaches the point where you don't even ask for it, then that's worthless. All people can do is say no,
Gotcha.
and there's always alternatives. But if you don't ask, then you don't get anywhere. So
Very nice. Good deal. Okay, clergyman, 13 minutes. He does a whole lot in 13 minutes, let me just say.
yeah,
There's a lot that goes on there. You wrote this, of course, along with William Gillies. Is that the proper way to say it?
yeah,
Okay.
that's
All right.
correct.
So co-writing is a little different than obviously writing it yourself completely. So tell me a bit about what William brought to the table and to this script.
He brought all the important things. The
Oh my God.
structure, the no, so I really came to him with that, as I said earlier, that really basic idea of I want two people tied to a chair with a never-ending fuse. And I think the first question he asked me when I was describing it to him was, well, why is the rope long? Why is it never burning? Like,
Sure.
what's the how do we dig into that and kind of give that more than just a, oh, for the sake of it kind
Right.
of feeling? In his mind, kind of formed the whole purgatory and that more kind of religious aspect to it. So he came to me with that, which then, yeah, just kind of opened up a kind of whole world of ideas for me. And we always knew, because in that situation it was going to be a slightly mobstery, gangstery kind of
Yes.
henchman type film. That was always kind of, we wanted, or sorry, as I should say, I began it in my initial kind of pitch to him saying, I want these people to know each other. I don't want it to be strangers. I want people to know exactly why they're in this situation and not be kind of panicked at like, oh, we're tied and we're gonna die. So that was the kind of
Sure.
Mutt character who was the level-headed, like, we're in this business, in a sense, it's inevitable. So I didn't want it to be, yeah, a fully kind of hostage film. It was more two people coming to terms with how they ended up there.
Sure. I get you.
Um, but yeah, so Will really came up with the meat of the story, and then as a filmmaker, what interests me is these kind of contradicting tones of these two kind of not very smart people talking absurdities in a very dark and serious scenario.
Sure.
So I tried to push that further and go, okay, how can we make this more ridiculous? Like, okay, it's to do with killing the boss's dog. All right, well, let's make sure it's a ridiculous dog and not
Right.
a normal dog. That's kind of how we worked there. But I gave Will very little to work with, and he really pulled out a great story, I feel. So
Very nice. Yes, he did actually. Musical score, to me, both odd and very ominous. So I wanted to ask about where did you pull that music from? And in your mind, does the music add to the story or maybe add as or become almost the backdrop for telling the story?
so where did it come from? And I know temp music is a very dangerous thing in the filmmaking world. Um,
Yes.
but I was watching The Leftovers at the time, and I
Mhm.
found the score to that just being incredibly like ethereal and powerful, and I was listening to it and I was like, I just love this. So when I spoke to the composer, I said, I want to kind of do what they've done here, but obviously to fit our film. And I wanted it to be stressful at times. I wanted it to not necessarily hit the kind of beats you'd expect it to hit. So in particular, the opening sequence where it's quite repetitive and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And I remember some people giving feedback initially, going, "Oh, I thought the music would kind of build at that point or really kind of dip at that point, but it's just stayed consistent." And to me, that was really important because that's the situation that these people are in.
Sure.
It's a constant. So they're freaking out, and the music is just kind of droning. So yeah, no, that was really important to me. And one of the funnest parts, to be completely honest. Yeah, I love working with composers, and what it does to a scene is remarkable. I remember we were really struggling with one bit in the edit, and the second we laid this temp music track down to it, it came to life, and it was like, okay, no, actually, we can work with this. So
Nice.
yeah.
Okay. Look at that. Now, when we see the story, obviously you have the gentleman to your left who's younger, gentleman to your right who is older. I have to imagine that that was done on purpose because the first thought that I had, and this could be me interpreting, because I interpret every film, of course, why not two mature felons, only different crimes, etc.? Why the young versus the old?
I wanted to make it obvious the kind of veteran versus rookie type thing,
Okay. Okay.
and that kind of notion of someone joining this world and kind of thinking it's all going to be fun and violence
Got
and
it.
all this, and then the other one who's a bit more kind of on that level-headed side, who knows the consequences and who knows really what this world is. So it was a bit of that naivety versus kind of knowledge, and I felt the best way to make that obvious was with someone who was new to this world, and in my mind that meant younger and kind of being nursed into it, as opposed to the person who's been around for a while.
Gotcha. You can always tell that a film is done well because, of course, it does well with storytelling, it does well with cinematography, and in this case, with the casting, I won't lie, I didn't like either one of them. But I'm guessing that's what you wanted to have happen because I'm like, these people are damn ridiculous, and I don't really care for either one. I mean, I like the mature criminal more. Don't get me wrong; it could be because, of course, I'm mature. But talk to me a bit about those folks. I've never seen those actors before, surprisingly, so this is the first time I'm watching them, and more importantly, tell me a bit about I almost thought that I could see the director in one of them. But again, I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah, so Adam Young is the younger one. He We found him after Kieran O'Brien, who was the older one. We worked with a casting director called Mandy Steele, who was
Okay.
absolutely lovely, and yeah, did a great job finding us these people. I think with Kieran, his enthusiasm off the bat was incredible. Called me up kind of immediately. We spoke for ages. We met up, went to the pub, and just chatted through everything. Then I met with Adam afterwards because we got him second, and again the enthusiasm and commitment to the project I could tell just immediately. And then working with them together, so we had maybe a day and a half to rehearse just because of scheduling and all that,
Sure.
and you could really see the difference in how they both worked, which I think is always incredibly interesting, and one of the funnest things about working with actors. Whereas with Kieran, I think if I asked him to be there for 24 hours straight, he would have just been there going over and over and over and
Oh
really
my
just
gosh.
whereas Adam was one of those actors who could just turn it on when he needed to.
Sure.
So yeah, it was that really kind of exceptional kind of just watching these two people who clearly have different processes, and both processes being so incredible, and seeing them, yeah, just on the day be able to kind of get there in their
Sure.
different ways. Because I do remember Adam, especially kind of after a certain amount of hours rehearsing, going, "Don't need to do this anymore. Like, I've got it. You've said
Okay.
what you need to say. I understand it. I'm ready to go."
Gotcha. And some
Um,
actors, yeah, they can do
yeah.
that. It's
Whereas
incredible too.
whereas with Kieran, especially, I think he got it quite quickly as well, but you could still just continue the conversation. And he's the easiest person to talk to, and you can just go for hours and hours and hours.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
cool. Now we want to talk, of course, about doing our job while being in discomfort, so to speak, because you, as you've already mentioned, this is two people in a church and they are back to back, and they are tied, literally tied to this chair. So, I mean, I get that it's an illusion. Well, obviously not, because you had to tie them up, right? So tell me a bit about that. How do you make not only the actors comfortable and make it tolerable, but also, of course, believable? You know what I mean? Because obviously there's the art of filmmaking, and then there's the reality of filmmaking.
So again, that question is very specific to I so Adam, we had him in the tank top, so we had the actual ropes on his skin, and we had to constantly break and make sure that that wasn't hurting him too
Right.
much. Whereas I feel like Kieran probably wished that we made him a bit more uncomfortable.
Oh,
I
really?
Yes, I think he was all out. He wanted to feel it. Yeah. He to to begin with, because he wanted to understand that, and it's just the type of great actor that he is, but that feeling of getting hit with petrol in the face, and what that would actually
Right.
do to his eyes. And in reality, it would blind you, and it would be incredibly, incredibly painful. And so he's there going, okay, well, what can I do to bring me some discomfort? He's
Right.
like, oh, what if I spray lemon juice in my eyes? And at that point, I had to go, Kieran, I'm gonna turn my back, and I will not be a part of that. But if it
Oh
gets
my
you
gosh.
in the role, then but no, it never got that serious, obviously. But that's just the type of actor that
Oh, of
he is, where
course.
he wants to push boundaries, and really try and get into the character, not only the character's head, but in the character's kind of physical state. Whereas, yeah, Adam probably felt like we pushed him too much into that,
Oh my gosh.
and
Okay.
Kieran not enough.
I
So
get you. We should
yeah,
all cast Kieran, just so you know, just in case anybody who watches this is a filmmaker. You got to cast that guy because he sounds terrific.
he will give you 300%.
Oh, that's awesome. Is
But
he open for
as will Adam,
interviews? Because
as
I
will Adam.
certainly would interview this guy. I'm like, he
Yeah.
sounds like the kind of guy I'd like to know. This is awesome. So the film itself, I like to, and this is again, I judge films, so I do my own interpretation. So I'm like, okay, first of all, I like the fact that the ending is open for interpretation. Is that intentional?
Yes, 100%. I got worried that it wasn't open enough, but I'm glad to hear that you do think it's
Absolutely, it's intentional. Second of all, the flame itself. Now, I'm guessing that not every audience member that watches it will actually catch what's really going on there. You know, because I didn't at first. I wasn't paying attention, and then I realized, oh, okay. So is that purposely a subliminal meaning? Meaning there is meaning that ties along with the whole confession and regret and retribution angle.
Yes, definitely. And it was kind of a little bit of a poke at the kind of superficial nature of it that I think you
Okay.
do see in some instances where something terrible can be done, and then you go, okay, well, I confessed or repent for it, so I'm okay. And it's
Aha.
like,
Yes, I get you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, but I'm like, and that's why I say the interpretation thing, because somebody might look at that and say, "Oh, wait," or they might not even notice that. I guess some of us who are, when you work in the business, you're kind of trained to have to pay attention to all that stuff.
To look out
'Cause-
for it. Yeah.
Yes, because if somebody asked me what Clergymen was about, I would say that's an interesting title because Cindy would have actually said probably confession and retribution. I would have named it something like that. I see where you're going with that, but I'm like,
Yeah.
isn't it really about this though? But again, that is the charm of having a good film when somebody can actually see that there's about seven meanings in the one story that you're putting together. But don't let me speak for you. So I'm going to give you the chance in three sentences. Tell everybody what clergyman is to you.
Oh, that's tough. Three sentences.
Just three. There's a reason it's tough because then they get it all lumped into three sentences.
It is confession and retribution. It's the superficiality of thinking that because there's a higher power, what you do down here doesn't matter if you repent and confess for.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a poke fun at that, I would say.
Do you think it's fair to say that, and at least in my interpretation, because I've seen it, my feeling is that the drama sometimes overlays the comedy. I won't lie about that. It becomes very tense and very very serious. And there are some very important themes that are there. Like for instance, my takeaway was you have two gentlemen that have obviously done some wrong things. And honestly, one of them is truly repentant. And the other one, I feel, is just guilted into confession, so to speak. So those underlying themes make you want to ask, is it really a drama or is it a comedy drama? I mean, you feel that it's equal on both sides?
I would definitely say it leans more into the drama. And so with the thing what you just said about Kieran's character, I'm assuming meaning his kind of his remorse and repent. We threw in that line of, oh, you knocked someone off last week
Yes.
as as a kind of to show that he doesn't really understand it and he doesn't really kind of accept the severity of his actions before. It's more a he's in this situation, he's in a church, he's staring up, and it's just, oh, maybe this will help. So it is still very much that superficial. I would say both characters aren't very clever, to
Mm,
put it
yes.
politely.
Yes.
So it's that kind of, oh, I'm in a bad situation. What could I do to help? Oh, people do this, don't they? What are they
Yeah.
called? Clergymen? They confess, and
Yes.
so that was
Yes.
the kind of.
You betcha.
So I would almost say, well, yeah, Worm is definitely forced into his confession there. In terms of them as characters, they both have an equal misunderstanding of everything that's going on.
You betcha. Now, I
Yeah,
understand that Clergyman is, of course, playing at HollyShorts, and we know that it's just starting the festival circuit, so it will be all over the place. And
we
because
hope
I'm all
so.
about shameless promotion, so what's up next for you? When is the next project coming out? What can we expect from you next?
So I have a film that I've written myself, which is a short film, sorry, which is called After Work.
Okay.
Um, that is about a woman who is working late one night and discovers a kind of horrific kind of void in the midst of her waste paper bin.
Hmm.
So that's again, it juggles similar tones. It's played out quite dramatically, but if you kind of step back and think about the situation and what you're seeing in the same way with Clergymen, you go, okay, yeah, that's a bit absurd. I'm
Sure.
not quite sure. So I have that coming out. That is just finishing post now, and hopefully we'll do a similar kind of festival circuit as Clergymen. And then we're getting ready to film my next short film as well, which I will be doing with Will, which is all about a pub quiz, which I think you guys have in America. You have pub
Yes.
quizzes?
Oh, sure
Yeah.
do. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's really
So it's
cool.
it's it's a pub quiz gone wrong. So
Oh my gosh, look at
yeah.
this interesting projects. Now, I know that you are on IMDb, and of course, you can be found on the London Film and TV website. Any other places to find you, like Instagram, Film Freeway, etc.?
Instagram, yeah,
Okay.
at tclark58. But yeah, that's about it, I think.
Okay. Absolutely
Yeah.
wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
Ted, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to me about Clergymen.
Uh,